Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and this, it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. I've got 3 words for you. Kanye album bomb. Yeah, I know there's other things going on right now. A new number 1, a sizable amount of activity further down the chart. But the big story this week is all about Kanye West Yay crashing into the top 40, triggering a shockwave down the Hot 100 that'll likely be a mess to clean up next week, presuming of course Kids See Ghosts doesn't create its own impact. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, and we do have a story with our top 10. Namely that, finally, after a number of weeks of work, Psycho by Post Malone featuring Ty Dolla $ign took the number 1. Now again, it's not a strong number 1 by any stretch. Radio gains were not consistent, it's not dominant in sales, and it got overwhelmed on streaming this week, but it did have just enough groundswell across the board to take advantage of the weaknesses for Nice for What by Drake, which is falling into a bit of a weird place. Sure, streaming is strong enough to keep it at number 2, but getting muscle back on sales and consistent radio gains are not quite enough to compensate for Post Malone's lead. Again, it's very much a margins game at this point, and I would put money on all of it being for naught in the face of I Like It by Cardi B featuring Bad Bunny and J Balvin, which is steamrolling up the charts with good sales, consistent streaming, strong YouTube, and surging radio. I would put money on this going to number 1. Probably not next week, but likely within the month unless Drake does something funny. But that's also not the only thing that Cardi B is helping along, because her collaboration with Maroon 5, Girls Like You, leaped up 90 slots thanks to the video and huge sales. And I would put money on radio getting on board with this song in a big way. It's probably gonna wind up being a hit. Yay. Now all this shoves back God's Plan by Drake down to number 5. But given how it's fading in all categories, I think the bigger surprise outside of the YouTube that will not die is that it's not dropping faster. And speaking of YouTube, Booed Up by LMA is continuing to rely on it a fair bit to push it up to number 6. Although her radio pickups have been pretty good as well, and it pushes back This Is America by Childish Gambino down to number 7. Again, radio pickups are coming in, but too slow to hold off losses in streaming and sales. But it's also where we have to discuss our first new arrival to the top 10, Yikes by Kanye West at number 8. What's interesting with this is that it's the one Kanye song that actually got some sales to match up with the streaming, although with no radio whatsoever, I would put money on this not really sticking around, at least not in the top 10. I would like to say the same thing for Lucid Dreams by Juice WRLD, also new to the top 10 at number 9 thanks to enormous streaming, but really it's hard to put money on this one. The groundswell seems kind of organic, so it's probably gonna stick around. And finally, we've got The Middle by Zedd, Maren Morrison, Grey at number 10. All it really has is sales and radio at this point, and given how it's losing on both, it'll probably be out of the top 10 fairly soon. And on that note, our losers and dropouts, and as usual, album bombs tend to hit a pretty wide swath, especially ones that land so high. And as such, while we've got the long-running songs like All the Stars by Kendrick Lamar and SZA, and Ric Flair Drip by Offset and Metro Boomin both exiting, we also have songs that are just cut a little bit too short or just muscled off, like Every Day by Logic and Marshmello, or Most People Are Good by Luke Bryan, and King's Dead by J-Rock, Kendrick Lamar, Future, and James Blake. And right now it's an open question if that song makes the year-end list at all. It'll be a margins game yet again. But then we have our losers, and let's get rid of a bunch of these as quickly as we can, like more Post Malone losses with Paranoid falling to 94, and Overdose by Youngboy Never Broke Again crashing to 72, and Call Out My Name by The Weeknd continuing to crash at 52. Then we've got the debuts from last week taking some major hits, like Big Bank by YG featuring 2 Chainz, Big Sean, and Nicki Minaj crashing at 91, or Praise the Lord, Deshaun by A$AP Rocky and Skepta hitting 70, and I'm Upset by Drake hitting 32. Good. Then we get the losers that have the points they need to make the year-end list and can kind of handle the hit, like Pray For Me by Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd to 44, Finesse by Bruno Mars and Cardi B falling off to 50, You Make It Easy by Jason Aldean down to 62, and Freaky Friday by Lil Dicky and Chris Brown to 39. Still gross, and it's gonna make the year-end list, and that's a problem. And from there, oh damn, if you relied on streaming at all, you took some serious hits, with Chun-Li by Nicki Minaj falling to 46, Dura by Daddy Yankee hitting 65, Hourglass Fly by Ray Shrimmer and Juicy J at 67, Japan by Famous Dex falling to 68, Dame Tu Cosita by El Chamba falling to 75, and Life Goes On by Lil Baby featuring Gunna and Lil Uzi Vert to 94. The only loser that kind of surprised me was One Number Away by Luke Combs, but it seems to have peaked on the radio and it looks like it's got a pretty steady decline ahead of it. Now where things get a little bit more interesting comes in our scant re-entries and gains, because Beautiful Crazy by Luke Combs returned with a vengeance at 77 with consistently good sales. Take Back Home Girl by Chris Lane and Tori Kelly rebounded to 100 because for some ungodly reason, radio is behind this instead of Luke Combs. And Welcome to the Party by Diplo, French Montana, and Lil Pump is back at 78, and I honestly cannot tell why with this one. It's kind of strange to see it back. Now for our gains, alright look, I already talked about Girls Like You, and I'd rather not talk about Taste by Tyga featuring Offset picking up considerably to 59, thanks streaming. But then we have Lovely by Billie Eilish and Khalid up to 79 thanks to streaming too. Okay, out of our gains, I like that song the most, so while I'll be skeptical how long it'll stick around or get any higher, I'm kinda hope it does. Again, it's a pretty good song. But now on to our mess of new arrivals, but before we deal with all of the Kanye, let's start off with number 99, Sin Pijama by Becky G and Natti Natasha. So all of you should remember who Becky G is. I still remember her most fondly for Shower 4 years ago, even though she's defiantly left teen pop behind for reggaeton, but I've actually talked about Natti Natasha here before as well. She had a song with Ozuna late last year and she was easily the best part of it. So I had hopes this could actually work, and yeah, it's alright, but it's also falling into a weird quasi-trend this year of songs that could be framed as very bi-curious at the very least, or in this case looking to satirize how guys imagine lesbianism, only for the majority of the song and the video to be playing into that very same gaze, where the aesthetic execution kind of overrides a lot of the intent, which is kind of a shame because I actually think this is a pretty decent song. The lyrics keep things sensual without needing to be all that explicit. Becky G and Natti Natasha have some good chemistry, and the plucky, slightly washed out keys touching against the acoustic guitar add a little bit more flavor to what could just be another blocky reggaeton song. I can't say it's incredibly memorable, but you know what, it's decent enough. I'll take it. Number 96, Youngblood by 5 Seconds of Summer. Okay, can somebody tell me what the hell happened to 5 Seconds of Summer? Seriously, they started heading off in an edgier, rougher pop-punk direction on their last album 3 years ago with songs like Jet Black Heart, which was really good, and instead of following that natural trend in the underground, which is overflowing with great pop-punk right now, they decided they want to follow in the mold of Maroon 5 or Zayn. Seriously, with the guitars drowned out in reverb and the blocky focus on bass and kick drums, it might have a little bit more groove behind it, but so much of the production sounds really blown out and clunky on the second half of the chorus that it utterly compromises any sort of melodic focus, which used to be one of the 5 Seconds of Summer's greatest strengths, instead replaced with these flat, buzzy lines of synth that don't really help or contribute much at all, especially in the back half of the song. And sure, the lyrics, they feel a little bit more mature in the deteriorating relationship that they describe, and Luke Hemmings is a capable enough frontman. He brings a lot more rawness than you would expect for this production, but give that groove some smoldering pop rock guitars out of this desaturated murk and then get back to me, because this song, it should be so much better. Number 89, Africa by Weezer. I'm gonna gonna keep this short. The original Africa is an 80s pop rock classic, coasting on gentle synth grooves and superb multi-tracking that knows exactly when to bring in elements like the gong and the marimba and the recorders and the spikes of guitar. So naturally the best thing to do is bring in Patrick Wilson's painfully basic drumming that can't remotely handle the subtle tightness of the song, flood the entire hook with these blocky guitar phases with way too much distortion on them, put an ugly gurgling synth line that doesn't match the original whatsoever on the bridge, and rely on Rivers Cuomo to... Honestly, I have no clue what level of irony he's operating on, only that this arrangement does nothing to make this remotely work. Okay, look, I'm as amused as anybody that Weezer notched a song on the Hot 100 in 2018, but the fact that it is this cover, yeah, no, not good. Next, number 85, Humility by Gorillaz featuring George Benson.
Reset myself and get control. Isolation. See the state of me now.
Yeah, if we're gonna get excited about an artist re-entering the Hot 100, can it be about Gorillaz instead? It's been 12 years since Dare hit the charts, and now in the lead-up to their next album, which seems to be coming amazingly fast, at the end of June this year, they've recruited legendary jazz and soul artist George Benson for a backup in a chill, synth-inflected funk song. And unsurprising to anybody, it's pretty damn slick and really enjoyable. Maybe lacking a bit of that darker surrealism that I found so compelling about Gorillaz' best songs, but Benson's buttery vocals and smooth guitar work plays off the slick bass grooves remarkably well, as it shows our frontman leaning into the humility to extend his hand, but more is just a plea for friendship and isolation. It's lightweight for the summer, but well balanced. It has some of those notes of melancholy, maybe a little bit too breezy for a lead-off single, but you know what? It's got potential. I like this song, check it out. Number 81, Must Have Never Met You by Luke Combs.
Sure sounds like a lie. And whoever said the time heals everything and everything will be alright. Whoever said it ain't the end of the world and you'll find somebody new. Must have never met you.
Alright, look, I want to stick up for Luke Combs. He's got a solid neo-traditional impulse, and he's got the texture in his voice to really stick the landing, but I cannot mince words. This sounds like a Jason Aldean song, and not a particularly good one. The sour melodies and the electric guitars, the overdone percussion, the odd oily touches around the production and the backing vocals, and while Luke Combs can write and sell a good breakup song, this post-breakup misery track just doesn't strike me as the best use of his talents. It's just kind of underweight and kind of generic. I'm not sure if this is the worst single he's ever released, but at least for me, it easily feels like the least essential. So, yeah, next. Number 55, Simple by Florida Georgia Line.
No, that's overrated. We've been there, it's safe to say it ain't our style. It's just that simple, S-I-M-P-L-E, simple as can be. It's just that simple, S-I-M-P-L-E, simple as can be.
Not gonna lie, I heard some people making fun of this song before I heard it myself. I mean, Florida Georgia Line realizing they needed to pivot to make rootsier music, so they decided to rip off Mumford & Sons and the folk sound of the early 2010s. That sounded like a genuine ride, especially with a whistle that I'm fairly certain was stolen straight from Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. And man alive, it is doofy as hell. I mean, come on, these lyrics celebrating how simple it can be are pretty much exactly what somebody making fun of Florida Georgia Line's meat-headed dumbassery, that's what they would use. And yet, I'm not gonna mince words, I kinda like this song. Part of it is the fact that I do have a weakness and soft spot for this sort of jaunty folk sound, and leaning into plainly organic tones is about the best thing that this duo could do, even if it only further proves how much High Valley and Brothers Osborne run circles around these guys. Still, for the mainstream, I don't mind this, and while I can't see country radio really getting on board with this sort of folk sound, I gotta admit, I wouldn't mind this sticking around. Not bad. Number 36, No Mistakes by Kanye West.
I still love you. Make no mistake, girl, I still love you. Make no mistake, girl, I still love you. Make no mistake, girl, I still love you.
Okay, the next 7 songs, they're all from Kanye. And if you already saw me review Ye, you'll be familiar with this song already. And like with other album bombs, I'm gonna try to keep this brief, so let's start off with one of the songs that I like the most on the album. And a lot of that comes down to the hook from Charlie Wilson and Kid Cudi, playing off the pianos and the horns and fragments of that Slick Rick sample. It's almost kind of reminiscent of older Kanye West songs, and I appreciate that. And yes, I've already said how I'm not really a fan of Kanye saying he doesn't take advice from people less successful from him, but I think what's actually funnier is him implying that he has shooters in Chicago, especially after his beef with the Rhymesayers earlier this month, proving how detached he might be from the city right now. But as it is, the majority of the song is fine enough, generally likable, unlike number 28, I Thought About Killing You by Kanye West.
Premeditated murder. And I think about killing myself, and I love myself way more than I love you, so...
I swear, I spent entirely too long arguing about Kanye West's opening monologue in the comments of my review of the album, so let me get my story straight here. Yes, I've seen the interpretation that Kanye's talking about killing of his ego or his artistic self, and I'm not really sure I buy it because any of the provocation is built upon the audience saying the words aloud to hear how it feels, and most of us don't really care about killing off our own ego or artistic self in the same mold as Kanye would. Now, my hypothesis has always been that it's focused on Kim, the person that he loves the most, but it could be focused on the audience, but that would imply that he loves his audience. And his concert antics has always seemed to kind of contradict that, but given how much the idea seems completely abandoned by the second half of the song, which mostly neuters a lot of the tension, I suspect the song will always fall in ambiguous territory. I can admit that my interpretation might not be correct there. And yet even beyond that, the auto-tuned warbles as a backdrop just don't do it for me. And when you get lyrics about how he calls up the Muslims on a song where he talks about murder-suicide and don't get your tooth chipped by Frito-Lay, all against the sound effect that sounds like Marth's counter from Super Smash Bros. Yeah. Regardless of where you stand on this particular one, it's a mess of a song and I'm not really a fan. Next, number 27, Violent Crimes by Kanye West.
Thank you to all of the heroes of the night. They gotta repaint the colors. The lie is wearing off, reality is upon us. Colors dripping off, colors dripping off.
The other song that I mostly liked on the album, where Kanye follows in the wake of Nas and Jay-Z in discovering how to value women thanks to him having daughters. He has a minimalist synth line and piano background, and actually a pretty nice hook from 070 Shake and Ty Dolla $ign. And look, Kanye is over 40. You'd like to think that he had learned a lot of these lessons by now, especially given a lot of the self-awareness that characterized a lot of his earlier work, specifically around women, and I'm really not afraid about how so much of his framing of the song focuses on his angst and worries being driven off this being the only real consequence to any of his actions coming off this album. But you know what, in the end, Kanye's heart is in the right place, and there is a grain of truth that guys do act and come to these revelations like this. But here's the problem. Number 24, Wouldn't Leave by Kanye West.
And I don't feel like, man, I know you wouldn't leave.
So let's not mince words. I can't stand this song, and it's really the moment where Ye falls apart utterly for me. I don't like Kanye West's ugly young thug impression against these half-formed pianos and keys. Jeremiah's bridge adds nothing, and while the choral moment of triumph, it is pretty, it's celebrating the fact that despite all the asinine things that Kanye has said and done in the public eye that could mess up the money, the one woman who could potentially call him out on him and make him stop chooses just to keep quiet and stick by him regardless. And then Kanye West turns into a celebratory moment for all the women who choose to stand by their guys who intentionally continue to fuck up in real time, uncaring of the larger consequences of their actions, because, at least for Kanye, there is no real consequences for his actions. It's the center point of the album, the turning point from the darkness into some form of light, but it's so bafflingly lacking in greater stakes, it hurts the stakes of the rest of the album, which leads us to, well, number 16, Ghost Town by Kanye West.
To make you love me, but everything I try just takes you further from me.
Okay, there are parts of this song that work for me. The squonking, overblown guitars that actually kind of click with Kanye and Kid Cudi and aggressively do not work with Party Next Door, all against the warbling organ and the bass sample. The lyrics seem to be about fighting to preserve some sort of deeper happiness against whatever mental hell you're going through, including the greater focus on the outro being a regression to childhood innocence. And, as already memed, 070 Shake seeing how she doesn't bleed if she puts her hand on the stove, she's free! And basic lack of any biology aside against the overblown percussion and flashes of spacey synthesizers, am I the only one not really at all a fan of her delivery, how she's free? It sounds like she's singing through a bad head cold. And the fact that Kanye thought it was a good idea to imitate it on Kids See Ghosts on that song Ghost Town Part 2, okay, we'll get to that soon. But before that, number 11, All Mine by Kanye West.
I'ma lose my mind in it. Crazy that medulla oblongata. Get the rubbing on my lap, get the chili out the bottom. Fuck it up, fuck it up. Pussy good, gon' back it up. Pipe up, I'ma pipe up. Make it mine, I done fell in love.
You know, it's very telling that two of the darker songs on the album were the ones that charted the highest. So let's start off with the less tolerable one, which is most recognizable by Ant Clemens with his breathy falsetto leading into Ty Dolla $ign as they talk about screwing lots of girls with fat asses. And I get that for Kanye it's more framed as an adolescent fantasy. How else do you explain that line about how he loves this girl's titties because they prove he can focus on two things at once, or how nobody would be here without cum, or how much he wants to seem to relish the opportunity to cheat against this incredibly minimalist production. But again, if you place the song in context right before Wouldn't Leave and you see Kim giving him a pass for of all this fantasy, yeah, it's a bit of a sour note for me, even as Kanye's flows do connect. And on that topic, number 8, Yikes by Kanye West.
Frightening, find help. Sometimes I scare myself. Shit could get menacing. Frightening, find help. Sometimes I scare myself.
You know, I was actually trying really hard to like this song. The darker synths on the hook, the bassy trap rumble, the Super Smash Bros. Counter noise that shows up again here. There's at least some chilly ambiance to the production that you could pull off as Kanye threatens to go off on the deep end until you get lines about Yeezy's just OD trolling and how he's praying for Russell Simmons who got Me Too'd, where Kanye West then wonders if it'll ever happen to him, which is something that I feel maybe deserves a little bit more examination and attention than just a cursory reference about the publicity from him, given that the movement of Me Too was about addressing those guilty of sexual harassment. But for Kanye, it's all about feeding into his persecution complex and not believing, and paranoia for being edgy and out there, and no, I'm sorry, not impressed at all. I'm not on board with this. I might like the production, but everything else, no. Not enough, not really that good. So yeah, Kanye's getting worse the week. Shocker with Wouldn't Leave. With dishonorable mention actually going to Weezer for absolutely bastardizing a great 80s classic on Africa. Now the best, yeah, Humility by Gorillaz, it clinches it here. But honorable mention, yeah, alright, fine. Violent Crimes from Kanye West, although it's more for the production and the hook, and you know what, some competent construction in the verses than much else. Next week, The Aftermath. Or will Kids See Ghosts be as disruptive as this? Stay tuned to find out. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.